Welcome back to Arguing Semantics. Oop, how are my glasses? They look really dirty. Let's clean those quick. Welcome back to Arguing Semantics. Today we are going to be talking about the wonderful new film, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. From the writing and directing duo Daniels comes Everything Everywhere All at Once. Evelyn Wong is a middle-aged immigrant who runs a troubled laundromat with her eternally optimistic husband, Waymond, while also having trouble connecting with their daughter, Joy. When they go to the IRS to deal with an audit, she is visited by a version of Waymond from another universe. He then gives her the ability to inhabit the minds and memories of other versions of herself from other universes in order to use their abilities. With this new power, she embarks on an adventure to defeat an entity that threatens the existence of the multiverse. So this movie was absolutely wonderful, almost top to bottom. It has a couple of very, very small flaws, but for me personally, this is probably my favorite movie of the year so far, and I think it's going to be tough to top. To start with, all the performances are great. It's a relatively small cast, but the cast that they have is used to wonderful, wonderful effect. Michelle Yeoh was a wonderful choice as the lead, and she anchors the crazy, over-the-top situation very, very well as a very no-nonsense, kind of stressed-out matriarch just trying to keep everything together. Stephanie Sue, who plays their daughter Joy, is absolutely wonderful as well. Brings a lot of humanity to her character. And then Jamie Lee Curtis is just in absolutely top form. You can tell she's just having a blast. Her character is over the top in just the right way for almost the entire movie. The real standout in the cast, however, is Ke Huy Quan, who plays Waymond, her husband, who most of you will probably know as Data from the Goonies or Short Round from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. He hasn't done a whole lot of acting over the years, but he has come back in top form and gives a wonderfully subtle and just delightful performance that honestly could easily get nominated for a Best Supporting Actor down the line. Just absolutely is 100% the emotional center of the movie and just brings a lot of fun to it. Also knowing that much of what he's done since then has been stunt work, you can really tell with some of the fight scenes that he's involved in. I really hope we get to see more of him in the future and that more people bring just these fun roles for him to play. Speaking of the fight scenes, the real standout of this movie is it was wonderfully well shot for the most part. They actually blend together a myriad of different styles and genres and mash them together in a way that shouldn't work, but totally does. It manages to feel completely unique and cohesive while jumping into all of these different genres: absurdist humor, Hong Kong drama, Western action film, 70s sci-fi, and even making some very, very specific references down the line that were just really, really wonderfully funny. This movie should not work the way they have it filmed, and it totally does, which just makes me more and more excited to see what Daniels is going to do moving forward. For those of you who don't know, the directors/writers are Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert, so they go by Daniels as a team. And so far, the main things that they're known for was they did the small, bizarre, but surprisingly emotional Swiss Army Man, and probably the thing that most people have seen is the video for Turn Down for What, which was also delightfully over the top. They have a very defined style at this point that I am just ready to watch anything else they make moving forward. The other thing that this movie does really well, it's another movie that blends drama, comedy, and over-the-top action in a way that few movies can pull off well, to the point where the antagonist in the film, this entity, they do a good job of setting them up, and then when they actually appear, they are simultaneously incredibly goofy and incredibly silly, yet very threatening at the same time. They do things that in any other movie would come off as comical, but uses it in a way that is very dark and existentially dreadful. It's really cool what they do with the antagonist and just stylistically throughout the movie. On top of having some of the most unique and inventive fight scenes I've seen in a while, when she's jumping from dimension to dimension, the skills that she is picking up aren't always the skills you think she's going to need, but they use those skills in interesting ways. Like there's a fight scene that involves her being a sign spinner in another universe. It's a lot of these little mundane skills that end up being exactly what she needs to get out of the situation that she's in. A lot of the movie is set around an IRS office, and they use everything they can within that context for both action, drama, and everything else. Which, as I said, because it's got a relatively straightforward and intimate story, it still manages to feel truly epic. It wasn't until you get to the end of the movie that you really think about where they went and how they got there that it was like the scale was relatively small, but it really does feel big, and it feels like an adventure, even though most of the movie takes place in one area. As part of that, the movie also has some of the most interesting costume design that I've seen in a while, being that the movie takes place in this multiverse with all this different stuff happening. It has a wide variety of styles that it reaches to throughout the movie, but it feels like a relatively low-budget movie with how the costuming works, but the concept was built around that low budget rather than what you see with a lot of low-budget movies where they take a big-budget concept and try to shove it into a low budget. This movie was really felt like it was built off the budget they had. Because of that, it ended up feeling really, really good. The two things that I think really make this movie work, where some other movies that I've seen lately, I'm going to be talking about Morbius in my next video, and woof. Yeah, one of the big things it does, it really relied on practical effects and practical staging over CGI. Part of that was probably because of the budget, so when there are effects being used, they are used very sparingly and very effectively, whereas almost everything else in the movie really comes down to clever use of lighting and staging. This really is a movie, if you have any kind of epilepsy, stay away from it. Lots of flashing lights, lots of fast-moving images and super quick cuts, but all play into the concept of this person jumping between dimensions incredibly well. Clever uses of freeze frame. Almost every shot felt like they really thought about what they were doing, and they really were honing in on this concept. It felt very, very focused, which is my big problem with a lot of movies I've seen lately, is the storytelling is really unfocused, and they're trying to do so many things that the main core of the story gets lost, which this movie did not do. It knows what it is and knows what it wanted to do, and everything feeds into that story. Everything eventually plays into some really, really excellent morals within the movie. While the movie does have a lot of fight scenes, it comes down to, it is a story about family drama and reconciliation, as well as how to confront conflict resolution. There is a big turning point, minor spoilers, in the middle of the movie, where the characters have to reassess how they are handling the situation and confronting conflict not as a fight, but how you can address the needs of those around you. That was just absolutely beautifully well done. They turned helping people into an amazing action sequence. I've never seen anything like it. It is great. And all of this comes down to a movie that was spectacular and felt truly unique. Like, while the idea of moving between dimensions has been done before in other movies, how they handled it and the way they used that to tell a particular story, I've never seen anything like this. I only have a couple of small things to say that might be a negative for some people. One, the movie has a very, very over-the-top sense of humor. You'll see what it is very quickly. They set up certain events that happen later right away that you'll be like, oh, this is where this is going, sort of a thing. This is the humor. If you've seen the video for Turn Down for What, you'll get an idea of these two guys' sense of humor. And that could definitely be a little over the top for some people. And then the only other major complaint I have is that the cinematography does get a bit messy at times. There were some points in some of the fights in particular where they were doing a lot of dynamic kinetic movement. The movie can feel a little ADHD at times, where there's a whole bunch of things happening all at once. Sometimes it's like you can get lost where you're supposed to be focusing. It's rare, and it only happens in a couple of instances, and once you acclimate yourself to it, it's much easier to follow as the movie goes along. But yeah, other than that, I really don't have any complaints with this movie. There's nothing I can say to not recommend this movie. There are things I'd love to talk about with this movie that I feel like you have to see first. So let's get into a little bit of spoilers now. Go to here. That'll be when the spoilers are over. So the big thing is the overall story ultimately comes down to the emotional relationship between these three main characters, husband, wife, and daughter. You have Evelyn, who is incredibly straightforward, and she is so consumed with the fact that her life hasn't gone anywhere that she wanted it to, that she has completely closed herself off emotionally from her daughter and her husband, to the point where the husband, Earl very quickly suggests divorce as a way to shock her out of her rut and get their relationship back to where it used to be, which just adds another layer where he is this eternal optimist who thinks that, suggesting divorce will bring them closer together somehow. Throughout the movie, it's her seeing where her life could have been and all the things that she could have been, but then also seeing the things that she kind of loses along the way. Either she doesn't have her wonderful daughter, or, she pushes her daughter so far that while her daughter resents her here, in another universe, she's literally trying to destroy the entire universe out of resentment for her mother, and feeling like she is so emotionally emptied by their relationship, by the stress of dealing with her mother, she cannot function anymore. And then the turn in the movie comes from eventually Waymond, throughout the movie, is doing little things that's helping the family and trying to keep them together, and Evelyn reads them as, you're just being silly, you're just being goofy, it's like, you need to be serious, you need to focus. And it turns out all those little things are his way of surviving by helping people through situations, by basically killing them with kindness. He saves the day more than once by not attacking those around him, but by bringing them closer to him. At one point, he just has this really emotional speech where he just wants everyone to stop fighting and just get along instead of attacking each other and bringing the universe down with them, which causes Evelyn to then fight, as she says, fight the way he does. And it turns into this amazing action sequence where she is fighting people by deflecting their blows and then looking into all the other universes and finding what they need and giving it to them to varying levels of goofiness. One is like, she's a chiropractor and she fixes his neck, to giving a guy a hug, to giving one guy, played by one of the directors, a spanking. In that kind of a way. And the idea that the conflict is ultimately resolved not through fighting, but other forms of conflict resolution, is pretty amazing and a wonderful message for this movie. Like I said, although the movie is this weird genre-bending roller coaster ride that you just kind of feel like you're on for most of the movie, it really does have this really interesting, really cool emotional core to it that you get to the end and it has this wonderful little message wrapped in this just bizarre exterior. All right, so spoilers over. Quick wrap-up time. Everything Everywhere All at Once is probably one of the most unique movies that I have seen in years. While it deals with a concept that has definitely been done before, it has never been done in this way, this well, or with this skilled of a mashup of genres and styles. The performances are wonderful. You can tell they used their budget to a good effect. The cinematography is delightful. It does things that I have never seen another movie do, much less this well. It really is just that good. The over-the-top humor might turn some people off, and there are some muddy visuals, but overall, it just is so spectacular. Long story short, big ol' recommendation. But that being said, my name is James, and this has been Arguing Semantics.
Like and subscribe.